Բարև ձեզ հարգելի բարեկամներ, Սփյուռքի ձայնը հեռուստահանդեսը դարձյալ ձեզ հետ է։ Այսօրվա մեր հաղորդումը ուզում եմ սկսել ձեզ ներկայացնելով Կոլումբիա համալսարանի հայկական ակումբի նոր միջոցառումը, քաղաքական խորհրդակցություններ, հայ-ռուսական եւ հայ-ամերիկյան հարաբերությունների շուրջ։
It's not necessary for you to know that.
Armenian Society of Columbia University for hosting the event, and AGBU University Outreach for co-sponsorship and support.
Fraction of the aid that Russia gives. It's a fraction of the economic support.
Depends how you are perceiving, which means if Armenia declared that Karabakh is integral part of Armenia, automatically all the
Of more than 600 publications in different languages, Russian and other languages. He is also a professor at Moscow State Institute of International Affairs and both Mr. Krikoyan and Dr. Nadak in New York.
Even more recently, as events changed in Ukraine and Crimea and the rest of the world. And those kinds of things get our immediate attention, and I'll certainly be happy to talk about those. There's a question about whether events in Crimea will affect Nagorno-Karabakh. And I can stand here and easily say that there are probably as many differences between the situation in Crimea as there are similarities. Nagorno-Karabakh was never a part of Azerbaijan. Crimea was a part of Ukraine. Nagorno-Karabakh is part of a referendum process, which had, until very recently, seemingly been controlled between Armenia and Azerbaijan, rather than initially, when conflict resolution discussions began, between Nagorno-Karabakh, or Nagorno-Karabakh having a full seat at the table. I was very pleased to see that Ambassador Warlick, the United States representative to the Minsk group negotiating conflict resolution terms on Nagorno-Karabakh, recently corrected himself and said this is a conflict between Nagorno-Karabakh and Azerbaijan, instead of picking up the Azeri characterization that this is a conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan. I was also pleased to see, and we actually received some confirmation today from the State Department, that the two presidents of Armenia and Azerbaijan met and at least agreed in principle to a summit to work out a peace agreement. Throughout this process and throughout almost all of Armenian-American relations, we as Armenian-Americans have been very careful, and I think the Armenian government has also consistently, through three presidents, been very careful to make the point and emphasize the point that Armenia ought not to be an area of competition between Russia and the United States, or between the West and Russia. Preserving Armenia as an area where this competition ought not to take place is important not only to us as Armenians, but I think also to Russia, the United States, and Armenia.
Dr. Armenian-American gave a detailed presentation about the current state of relations between Armenia and Russia. He stated that while Armenia seeks good relations with the West, if presented with a choice, Armenia would undoubtedly choose to remain in close partnership with Russia.
It's a joke to talk about Russia and America concerning Armenia. America is too far away, and American presence in Armenia is very symbolic. All Armenian economy, or at least the biggest part and the most important part, is owned by Russia. Nuclear power station, hydropower stations on Razdan Cascade, aluminium factory, mobile telecompany, and many others. 2 million Armenians living in Russia, and lion's share of money which now is coming to Armenia, it's not coming from America or from Middle East or from other places. The money comes from Russia. many billionaires in Russia, Armenian origin, many multi-millionaires, very successful in every place. And Armenia is part of every other Russian-led international organization in the region. CIS, CSTO, now Armenia is going to join Customs Union. Russia has 3 military bases outside of Russia. One of them is in Armenia, 2 others in Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan. Russia, together with Armenia, is, guarding the Armenian border with Turkey. If there'll be a choice between EU and Russia, never ever, there was not even a doubt that Russia is the first choice. Because, as I said, this is not because just words. As I told you, look at the map, economic situation, economic, military, political interdependence. If to choose between, it's clear for Armenia. In every sense, economic sense, military sense, cultural, every kind of sense.
In engaging an informative discussion, Mr. Van Grigorian and Dr. Andranik Migranyan each presented their own unique point of view and expressed at time opposing opinions. The event followed by lively Q&A with attending audience, which consisted of both international students as well as members of our community. I'm curious about your personal opinion. Crimea, the crisis in Crimea, from some viewed as a Russian aggression, and some for others viewed as a case of self-determination. How do you see it?
Well, I see it as a mix, basically, and you can understand the arguments on each side. I think that looking at opinion makers and actually reading the messages and reading between the lines of even Western Europeans and U.S. officials, people that study this area understand that Crimea was historically a part of Russia and that it was, quote, a gift to Ukraine. I think that, like with a lot of things in life, sometimes it's not what you do, it's how you do it.
From point of view of Armenian Assembly here, you are obviously working very hard with U.S. government in recognition of Armenian genocide, in recognition of Nagorno-Karabakh, in Armenian aid, and serious other issues. Aren't you worried that the growing conflict between Russia and America, or East and West, will affect your work and will affect the effectiveness of what you do here?
No.
Why so?
I'm really not worried about that because, as I said in the comments, that we have done a good job, and Armenia has done a good job in maintaining that Armenia ought not to be a place for competition between Russia and the United States. It just isn't. It shouldn't be. The Armenian bonds and ties to the United States are permanent. They're based on shared values. They're based on the Armenian-American community. The Armenian ties to Russia are even more significant, frankly. But there is a clear understanding of what Armenia's position is, and it will not become a bone of contention between Russia and the United States. At the same time, I will tell you, as the Armenian Assembly, we're very much in solidarity with Ukrainian Americans and others, because let's not forget, I think we have something like 600,000 Armenians living in Ukraine, in Crimea and in Ukraine. And it really does matter. So we are in solidarity with Ukrainians. And I think the President of Armenia went out of his way to say that we're brothers. And we're certainly in the United States working closely with Ukrainian American groups as well.
Thank you very much for this very informative and interesting evening. I have 2 questions for you. First, as you know, in Western media and in West, there's a large condemnation towards the activities in Crimea. I'm curious to see, how do you see these events? Do you see this as a Russian aggression, or do you see this as a historical self-determination of a land that always belonged to Russia and obviously was given to them by Khrushchev in 1950s?
Of course, for sure, this is the right of self-determination of Crimean population, and Russia had every legitimate right to recognize Crimean independence because in Kiev, practically Western nationalists and radicals, armed bands, they organized a coup and kicked out the legitimate president from Kiev. And in Crimea, local authorities declared that they are taking all responsibility for the peninsula in their hands, organizing referendum and deciding their future. And they, in referendum, voted for independence, and after that voted for rejoining with Russia, which means this is absolutely in accordance with every kind of international law and self-determination. This is something which West passed already several years ago in case of Kosovo and in many other cases.
Do you see similarities between Nagorno-Karabakh and Crimea? In both cases, it was given during Soviet era, and then people have voted as a self-determination. And if so, do you think that the Western rejection of it will have a negative effect of recognition of Nagorno-Karabakh moving forward?
No, I don't think that West was ready any time to recognize Karabakh's decision for self-determination, though it is increasing the position of Armenia dealing with Russia, because first time at least Russia recognized this self-determination rule, which is important because since the collapse of Soviet Union, never Moscow used this right for self-determination, which is of course very positive concerning Nagorno-Karabakh issue.
And finally, in your presentation, you gave a long list of Armenian dependence from Russia: cultural, economical, geographical, and so forth. Aren't you worried that such a close tie will eliminate or cut off Armenia from a Western ideal, particularly about a freedom of speech and human rights, being so much part of Russia and so much dependent on Russia? Because obviously we can argue that Russia doesn't have as high of a standards as Europe or rest of the West.
Oh, we are on our way to a kind of more open society, more pluralistic, more democratic. And this is quite natural that at this moment neither Russia nor Armenia might be as advanced in sense of democracy, but because our countries are living in current situation for a couple of decades, contrary to many others who are living centuries. That's why it takes time. That's why I am optimistic concerning Armenia's future in sense of democracy. And by the way, Armenia is a pretty democratic country. If somebody has any doubts, has to go there and to see power, authorities, opposition, conflict in media, everywhere, in parliament, which means, of course, we are not as democratic as Great Britain, but we are catching up.
The Armenian Society of Columbia University is an active and dynamic body of students of Armenian descent. The organization constantly engaged in a variety of activities, ranging from political to cultural, religious to educational, with the goal of promoting Armenian culture, heritage, and history.
I think in Armenia's political sphere, political arena, there is a lot of debate going on of whether Armenia made the right choice of joining customs union versus association agreement with the European Union. And in my personal opinion, I think the best takeaway, and many individuals might not agree with whatever our speakers had to say, but I guess the main takeaway of the night would be that security of your borders and security of your land, I guess, comes as a priority versus, other values, might be democratic, might be freedom of speech, human rights, so on and so forth. Those are very important. But at the stage where Armenia is, having population of 3 million people and surrounded by 150 million population of Muslims, and more than half of which is not, to put mildly, friendly towards Armenia, I guess Armenia didn't have that option and had to choose to join the customs union.
Narek, thank you so much for this wonderful evening. It was informative, it was emotional, it was very relevant, obviously, to what's going on. Did you feel personally that there was a lack of information from both sides of the story? Was that your first motivation to create this event?
Actually, the lack of information in diaspora about contemporary Armenian developments is somewhat sensible, and I personally feel that there is not enough information coming from Armenia, and whatever information comes, it is not always substantial and not always accurate, in a sense that it is interpretation of analysis of someone else, and it's not a first-hand information that comes. So this event was particularly designed to bring this first-hand information to our community and to our members of the Columbia University as well, so that they can have their analysis of their own of the contemporary events that happening, not to listen an analysis of someone else's, but to have a first-hand information and analyze the situation for themselves.
You had two speakers that agreed on many things, but it was obvious that they had somewhat different point of views. Was this intentional?
Of course, it was intentional. I decided to model the discussion in a way that we can have two very different opinions, somewhat conflictual, and that was part of the bringing on the table information, not biased information, clear of the biases as much as possible.
If other students of a university watch this program, how can they contact you? What's the best way to contact you guys?
We're on Facebook, Armenian Society of Columbia University. Basically, that's the Facebook page, and we're also on columbia.edu, student organizations. There is Armenian Club. If they click on the link, they can actually be referred to the website, to our website, and also individually. They're welcome to contact us anytime.
I just want to use this opportunity and also say a couple of words to our audience, a wider members of our community. We have this wonderful, young, vibrant society here, putting up serious issues, having serious conversations. So when these events happen, please follow, please come. These are open houses, and everybody welcome. Narek, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.